This is a Hot Wheels custom Corvette, one of the original 16 cars Mattel made for their Hot Wheels line in 1968. This is the US made version, as it has the clear windshield and taillights are part of the base. This car, along with several others, was very kindly donated by Grant Fuller. I really appreciate it, Grant. Thanks a lot. An interesting note about this casting is that Mattel was able to get this car in stores before General Motors was able to get the real car to Chevy dealers. For the US version, brown seems to be the most rare, and for Hong Kong, creamy pink is considered extremely rare. I couldn't find any current or past sales of the creamy pink to reference, but my Redline Bible puts a loose mint at about $1,300. But of course, it's always a little bit overpriced. The prices of these castings are sort of all over the place, but you can expect to pay over $300 for a vintage mint, around $70 for a really nice restoration, and about $8 for one missing the wheels and hood. This particular car is in decent shape, with the only issue being it has a broken driver's side tailpipe. So per my normal procedure, I'll take the car apart and then remove the old paint, exposing the underlying metal. From this point, I can go several different ways depending on the condition of the metal. If it still has a lot of zinc in place and not much oxidation, I might try using some 4-aught steel wool to remove the oxidation. If the oxidation is bad, or if I feel removing it's going to take some amount of time, then I'll dunk it in the electropolishing tank, as it removes all the oxidation in a few seconds. Be that as it may, you can always remove the oxidation with steel wool or sandpaper, given enough time. When the car comes out of the polishing bath, it has a dark gray to black coating on it. I believe this is a reaction between the bath and the zinc, as cars with a lot of zinc, like this one, turn really black, while cars with little to no zinc hardly change color at all. Either way, it doesn't matter, as the black coating is easily removed with steel wool, or a toothbrush and rubbing compound, or even toothpaste. At this point I could sand out the imperfections, however I won't be on this car and we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail later. Instead, I'll wash the car with soap and water and then clean it with a degreaser. After the degreaser is washed off with distilled water, I'll drop the car in a zinc plating bath. I'll leave it here for 30 minutes at about half a volt and 100 milliamps. I find 100 milliamps to be the sweet spot for plating these cars. This gives a good even plate with no burn marks. This car is in pretty good shape, so I'll only be plating it for 2 30-minute sessions. After the first session, I'll remove the car and dry it. I'll then polish the zinc with steel wool, taking care to only polish in one direction. The reason I do this after every 30 minutes in the plating bath is sort of hard to explain. The zinc goes on even, but not perfectly even. It takes on a rough texture as the crystals form, and if I do not sand this down, it will continue to get more and more rough. So after 30 minutes, it's as rough as, say, 600 grit sandpaper. After an hour, it might be 300 grit. After 2 hours, I wouldn't even be able to use steel wool and would have to use sandpaper. So removing it every 30 minutes resets the surface for the next plating layer, and each progressive layer is easier to sand than the last. So you might have noticed in my last Redline restoration video that I did not polish the car. And I'm not going to polish this one either, at least not with anything besides the steel wool. The reason is, I want to get back to real restorations. Mirror polishing the cars looks great, but it's not what Mattel made back in '68. It's more like what they make today if you're in the Redline Club. The cars back then looked great, but were not perfect. If I remove all the imperfections and polish the surface, I get a great looking car, but one that looks strange next to my vintage mint Redlines. That's not to say I won't be polishing cars in the future, I certainly will, but these rare cars, I just want to take them back to what they once were. The zinc plating is the real game changer here. It fills in the really small scratches and pits and polishes to a bright luster with the steel wool. More importantly though, it removes all discoloration. A lot of the reason I was mirror polishing before was to get around metal discoloration issues. The zinc fixes that. Switching over to the base, I can see that it's only mildly oxidized. So to get it where it needs to be, I will go over it with some steel wool. I'll also remove the paint from the front and the taillights. I want the base to be shiny, but still show a little bit of age. I decided to go with red for this car. I really needed an orange one for my Sweet 16 orange set, but found out at the last moment that I didn't have any orange paint left and had to order some from the Redline shop. So red it is. There's something about a red Corvette though, so I'm not disappointed. Like all the red lines I paint, I like to start with a tack layer and then add on more thin layers up until my last coat, where I go pretty heavy. After the car is painted, I set it aside and then put a plastic tub over it to be sure no dust can get to the surface. While the paint cures, I'll wash the interior plastic and the windshield in some warm water. This gives me an opportunity to look them over and take note of their condition. Both are in really good shape. The windshield only has a few light scratches on it, so I'll polish them out later. The paint came out looking pretty good. However, I could detect a small amount of orange peel, so I went ahead and polished the car for good measure. For the taillights, I'll go with my red Sharpie. Again, Sharpies are transparent and darken with successive use, allowing me to get a light to a dark red. Since it's transparent, the metal behind it shines through, giving a neat effect and the illusion of a realistic taillight. The last thing I'll need to paint is the front grille. This is done by masking off the area and then airbrushing over it in black primer. I make a slight mistake here that I noticed in editing the video. The black paint was not supposed to go all the way to the sides. Instead, there should be a thin strip of metal exposed between the black and red paint. An oversight on my part that I fix later. As I mentioned before, the windshield had some very small scratches that I removed with a polishing wheel and some polishing compound. With that final detail taken care of, I can start putting the car back together. Total cure time for the paint was about 3 days. The wheels are normal Redline shop reproduction wheels. I did all the axle alignment off camera as it's rather boring to watch and difficult to film. They were not all that bad to begin with. It's interesting to me how the axles and wheels of these cars are always curled down. It happens too often to be a coincidence. I guess it's because the axles are free to travel up but are blocked by the base when pulled down, so kids pushing on the cars has no effect, but any kid that pulled on the wheels down would bend the axle, I guess. I don't know. These are the things that keep me up at night. Well, anyway, let me know what you think below, and as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.